Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is the final day of June. My name is Faraz Patel. This is the Daily Factor, and I'll be in your company for the next 1 hour. Well, coming up, we are going to be unpacking yesterday's historic Constitutional Court decision on former President Jacob Zuma. We'll then be speaking to a former Fees Must Fall activist on the current situation in Swaziland. Followed by that, we will be going to our community updates and the Pretoria Legacy Foundation and the work they are doing there. We'll, of course, be recapping the NCCC announcement, this time focusing on Bheki Cele, the Minister of Police, and what he had to say with regards to Level 4 regulations from the Police Department. Then, in our sports section, we'll be speaking to Bongiwe Umsomi. She has just joined the famed Rock Nation sports stable, and she's just one of the few elite athletes that are joining this ever-growing brand of Rock Nation. But before anything, let us look at our COVID-19 statistics for South Africa. And South Africa recorded 13,347 new confirmed COVID-19 infections and unfortunately 226 deaths. This now brings the death total to 60,264. Now, as of yesterday, Gauteng had recorded a total of 638,326 confirmed cases, followed by KwaZulu-Natal with 353,348 and the Western Cape with 320,384. Well, let us go to our local updates. Well, yesterday was a historic moment in not just a constitutional court perspective, but what happens to a former head of state. South Africa's highest court, of course, the Constitutional Court, found former President Jacob Zuma guilty of contempt of court and had sentenced him to 15 months in prison, a landmark move in the country's long-running corruption. The Constitutional Court of South Africa ordered Zuma present himself at a police station in his hometown of Nkandla or in Johannesburg within the next 4 days. So President Jacob Zuma has basically 96 hours to present himself to a prison, either in KZN or in Gauteng. Now, from a constitutional perspective, I had a chat with Professor Pierre de Vos. He is a constitutional law expert and lecturer, and he broke down from a constitutional point of view how yesterday's proceedings went down and what happens in terms of future constitutional court proceedings and how this could affect everything going forward. Take a listen to this. Now, joining me to unpack yesterday's proceedings at the Constitutional Court, I'd like to welcome constitutional law expert and Professor Pierre de Vos. Professor de Vos, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Professor de Vos, now for the old Joe soap in the street, unpack for us the contempt of court and how former President Jacob Zuma was found guilty of that. I know we spoke about this back in February when he, of course, had missed the hearings at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, but just break down from a constitutional perspective why he was found guilty on this basis.
Well, contempt of court, there are many versions of it, but in this particular case, it happens when somebody is ordered by the court to do something and they refuse to do it, they fail to do it. And when you then go to court, the parties say who wanted the order to be made in the first place, in this instance, the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, then the court, if they are sure that beyond reasonable doubt the person is guilty of contempt of court, they can do a few things. They can try and force the person to go and implement the court order. They can do so, for example, by saying, if you don't go and testify before the commission, then you're going to prison. Or, as they have done in this case, they have said, well, you've already said you're not going to comply. this is a threat not only to this court, but to the whole legal system. And so we're going to punish you to enforce the authority of the court and to establish that nobody is above the law. And that is what happened here. That is why the former president was sentenced to 15 months in jail.
Professor de Vos, it was not just once that he had missed attending the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. It was quite numerous times. So is there a fair assessment to say that based on that, the Constitutional's arm had to be twisted in a way that this was the best sentence for him due to the fact that he had missed most of these hearings?
Yeah, you see, there are two issues that people mustn't conflate. The first one is that there was a summons. He didn't obey the summons. That is a different criminal offense. He has not yet been prosecuted for that. I think he should be prosecuted for it, but he hasn't yet. Because he hadn't obeyed the summons as was legally required to do, the commission went to the court. And so this case is not about the summons. It is about the court order of the Constitutional Court, which he ignored. So the court ordered him to go and obey the summons, and he refused. So for that reason, he was then found in contempt of court, not of the commission. That is a different process which may or may not proceed on another day.
When the judgment was being passed, Professor de Vos, and I'm sure you were seeing it on TV, how warm did it make you feel that we now can see our constitution taking a whole new level, not just on a citizen of South Africa, but somebody who had held the office for 10 years?
Well, it's of course sad that anybody is going to go to prison, but it is also very important that the courts have to protect themselves. They have to protect the legal system. And in this case, obviously, the attack by former President Zuma and his lawyers on the whole legal system, on the democracy, if you will, was so egregious and so unacceptable that the court had to act. And so the majority of the court, at least, did so in ringing terms. They understood, I think, unlike the minority, what was at stake. If they hadn't made this judgment, it might have delegitimized the court to a large extent, because people would have said, well, if you are a famous person, if you're powerful, then you're above the law. And the court said, and that I do agree that it made me feel good, as it should every South African who believes in the system, that this is not the case. Everybody is equal before the law, and that the courts, even with one of the most powerful people in the country, will stand up and will assert their authority to make sure that people obey the law.
Professor de Vos, the appeal, of course, topic has come, and that topic is, can we see former President Jacob Zuma's legal team going ahead and appealing the sentence? Just your take on regards to that. Is there a chance or isn't there a chance for a potential appeal?
I haven't actually seen that they are going to appeal. If they are, I'm not sure why the former president would be paying them any money, because that is a nonsense. I cannot imagine that there's never been in the history of South Africa an appeal from the Constitutional Court. It is a final judgment. It cannot be appealed. So I would have to see what the arguments are, but on the face of it, it really looks a bit like a publicity stunt. I cannot imagine that they really believe that this is what the law says.
Now, I'm asking that because, of course, you've been hearing his supporters, of course, and I know it's a political debate for another time, but a number of his supporters have come out and saying that we're going to try our best to make sure the president doesn't go to jail, and of course that would mean they would need to stop or block the prison wherever he is going to be serving. But importantly, Professor de Vos, the age of impunity, it's an article I saw in the Daily Maverick early on. This is a huge step in making sure that we now see the law trumping any sort of impunity, that not just leaders, but people who believe that maybe we can trample on the law.
Yes, so the problem, and this is a problem that the majority of the Constitutional Court also acknowledged with these kind of situations, is that if there's a powerful person, somebody like former President Zuma, and they defy the law, they act as if they're above the law. If all there's his supporters act as if they are above the law, then of course it becomes law of the jungle, so to speak. It becomes a place where those with power, prepared to use more violence, they are going to prevail. That is not a society in which any sensible person would want to live under any circumstances. So in that sense, yes, we will see, of course, how this plays out. There will be people who are going to still continue to insist that some people should be above the law, but this is a very good and heartening first step to end that the years of impunity, as you call it.
Professor de Vos, the Constitution has always been something that has been enshrined in us South Africans. When we look at yesterday's judgment, how far can we as South Africans now trust this Constitution to go ahead and really, guard us from criminality and, of course, as you mentioned, impunity?
Yes, so the Constitution, of course, is not omnipotent. It cannot do the impossible. So the Constitution provides for safeguards. One of them is that the exercise and the abuse of power, both inside the government and outside it, can be checked through the legal system and ultimately the Constitutional Court. That is very important. But the Constitutional Court cannot do the impossible. So much of the problems in our society is, of course, political. It is about politicians who we elect not doing their job, stealing money, all those kind of things. So there is also a political element involved here, and there's also a duty on every citizen, actually, to play their part to make sure that these abuses don't happen, because while the court can check the abuse of power in the legal field, they cannot really do so in the political arena. That is for us who want to vote or protest or make our voices heard in some other way.
Final question, Professor de Vos. Historically, how massive was yesterday, and what message does it send to the rest of South Africa in terms of not just the trust of the Constitution, but most importantly that here is the highest court of the land, and we're seeing the highest court of the land exercise its rightful power to sentence those who go against it?
Well, it is unprecedented in the sense that no former president in South Africa has ever been sentenced to a jail term. We know that it has happened in other countries like France and so on, but never in South Africa. And so the important principle here is that the court was not scared to do this, despite the fact that there's huge political pressure and obviously threats from certain quarters that they will make the country ungovernable. But the court said, this is what we do. And it is reverberating not only through South Africa, but across the world. I had messages yesterday and today from law professors in Germany and elsewhere, who are taking note of this judgment and saying that it is something that anybody who believes in a constitutional system should be proud of.
Professor Pierre de Vos, we'd like to say thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
That was my interview with Professor Pierre de Vos, and I think what's interesting about it is that, right, President Jacob Zuma's legal team may want to find some sort of potential loophole to try and appeal, but the question is, this is the Constitutional Court. It can't happen. He needs to go and spend time in prison. So it's going to be interesting what's going to happen, and we are going to try to get political reactions during this week to what has happened. What are his supporters going to do? We, of course, know the faction within the ANC. There's a strong support for President Zuma. Are they going to stop him from going to jail? What's the next plan for the former president? It'll be really interesting to see. But all I can say is that this has been a historic moment for South Africa, and what this would mean for leaders who try to act without impunity. And there is a law that protects us as citizens and holds us to account. Well, coming after the break, we'll be switching our focus outside the borders of South Africa. Do stay tuned.